evening, everyone. How are you? Thumbs up. Good. We have already opened the meeting. We were in closed session. We've come out of closed session, so we don't. The clerk has already read the statement of compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. So at this point, I would just like to welcome everybody and ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence in commemoration of Hurricane Ida.
Oh,
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, it's gonna be one of those nights. Just a moment of silence, please, for memory. Thank you. All right. First on the agenda this evening is the approval of the meeting minutes from the July 21st, 2022 closed session meeting and the July 21st, 2022 voting session meetings. So any comments or questions from the council about the minutes? Well, may I have a motion, please?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start off with a couple of items that the council has been talking about in closed session for some period of time. The first one is in relation to the farm market at the Clausen property. This is a conversation that the council has been having really since January. The conversation has evolved quite a lot over the months. As you all know, we own the Clausen property now, and the council, while we've been very busy with IDA work and city business, we've been very mindful of the fact that we own this, and we've begun to have some conversations about possibly establishing some direction. And one of the first topics that came up was the farm market. Obviously, everyone knows that Fisherman's Mark is there this year. They have a 12-month lease. And the council really wanted to be deliberate and thoughtful in terms of looking at the property as a whole. But I think early on, we decided that it might be best to take a look specifically at the farm market as a way to begin to kind of look at the site. So, without going through all of the details, basically what we've come up with is the idea that we might release what's called an expression of interest, a document which would go out to the request for expressions of interest, and that would allow for individuals, groups, businesses to approach the city with the potential use for the farm market. And it's a very general, wide open request. So we would really be kind of casting a net fairly wide. And part of this is just to understand what interest there may be in that particular building on the property. Does anybody on the council have anything to say about this at the moment?
If you could bring forward, isn't there an exception that we're putting in there about interest, about whether it's residential, commercial?
There's a line in the draft that says that the city is not entertaining residential component at this time, but apart from that, it's
Okay.
Thank you. Well, for clarifying that.
I just note, Mayor, that this does not require us to accept any proposal that's put forward. Say no.
That's right. And Bill, do you want to highlight any other sort of features of the?
I think that's the most important provision. There's nothing binding on this. This is simply information gathering from the city. If the city sees a proposal that it likes, it can discuss further.
Yeah, can you pass the mic?
There's nothing binding by these submissions. The city is just gathering information at this time. Reserves the right to reject any submission it receives. So basically, if the city does receive a responsive submission, I think it's worthwhile, we'll discuss it and it'll be discussed with the public and the city can move forward on that end. But if it doesn't receive anything, I can learn from the experience, go out and seek more information, and the process is going to be about 60 days, and then the city will evaluate any responses and received into that.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any other comments or questions from the council about this? And certainly, I'm available to speak to people at any time about this. You all know where to find me. Happy to have a conversation. As Mr. Opal said, if we adopt this resolution, we will put this out the first week of September, and it'll go through the first week of November, and then we'll take stock at that point.
You might want to just mention the relationship to the site plan first.
Which is
So we, as people will remember, when we purchased the Clausen property, we said we didn't want to make any decisions about how it or portions of it would be used without a site plan process. We have not done that site plan process yet. So part of this is to gather information from potential businesses, developers, people out there that we may not know of who have suggestions about how that could be used. So it really is an information gathering process that is ultimately part of the site plan process.
And could you just explain how this would affect the tenant that's currently in there?
Yeah, so at the moment, as I said, Fisherman's Mark has a 1-year lease. At the September council meeting, I intend to bring forth an ordinance which would allow for an extension of their lease for at least 6 months. As we evaluate what may or may not be appropriate for the site or what's interesting for the site, we want to make sure that Fisherman's Mark, that we're dealing with Fisherman's Mark with obviously with fairness and sensitivity and giving them all the time that they need. Should we, adequate time should something come up in the meantime. So we'll take that up in September. Any other points or questions I missed? Okay, so the resolution, I'm going to read it. Resolution number 158-2022. This is a resolution of the city of Lambertville and the county of Hunterdon, New Jersey, authorizing the preparation and issuance of a request for expressions of interest for the redevelopment of a portion of block 1002 lot 41, the farm market portion of the Clausen property. Is there a motion from the governing body to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All right, may I have a roll call vote, please, Cindy?
Councilwoman Lambert,
Just a second, I'm looking for it on the agenda. It's in the packet in the close. Oh, this one, okay. Yes.
Councilman Sanders,
Yes.
Councilman Stegman,
Yes.
Council President Taylor,
Yes.
Mayor Noack.
Yes. Thank you. The second matter that we've been discussing in closed session relates to the Lambertville High School redevelopment area. Back in March, the city was approached by K. Hovnanian developers to enter into conversations about the possibility of development on that site at a meeting on, I'll just get my notes here. A lot of notes. Well, at a meeting in March, I met with representatives from K. Hovnanian, with Emily Goldman, Julia Taylor, Council President Taylor, and a couple of other people to just kind of hear some initial thoughts from them. Since that time, Councilman Stegman and I have gone to the site with representatives from K. Hovnanian. They have proceeded to complete almost all of their due diligence on the site, and yes. So sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied tonight. So meetings have continued, and conversations have happened, and so at this time, expecting that this is a good faith plan, we've talked to the council and considered naming them a conditional redeveloper for the site. And basically what that does is it allows us to enter into a relationship with them at no expense, no cost, no obligation. So that will give us the opportunity to meet with them. It'll give us the opportunity to set up an escrow account where all of our professional advice will be billed directly to K-Hog Mannion. And I really just want to emphasize that this is the very beginning of a conversation, really. The council has not been involved in any conversation specifically about a specific plan. We've had no direct talks as a council with K-Hog Mannion. Just some of us with them in certain meetings. So are there any questions from the council on this or observations?
This resolution that you discussed is similar to what the council did a year ago with the Italian corporation. Is that right? So,
Yes.
So maybe recap for the public kind of what that process is, high level steps.
Sure. So our understanding is that K.O. Mannion Homes LLC is the contract purchaser of the former high school site. They have contacted the city to start the process because the high school site is in an area of redevelopment and its zoning is covered in the redevelopment plan. They're required to enter into a redevelopment agreement with the city for any development that goes on that site. So the initial, because the city is still in the process of negotiating what potential project could go forward there, the city would like to designate them as a conditional redeveloper for approximately 90 days from the date of this resolution, so that the city professionals can have a good faith negotiation, figure out a project that works for the city and for the developer and satisfies certain obligations that the city is required to commit to. So the only real obligation that the city is undertaking is that we'll negotiate with exclusively for this 90-day period. And with the idea that at the end of that period, there will be an agreement. If there's not, then designation will go away and the parties can further negotiate to extend it.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
At what point in this negotiation will there be the opportunity to present the concept plan whenever that's done? Because right now there really isn't any negotiated plan. At what point in that will we see and speak about it in the public, be able to weigh in?
Well, it's my understanding, Bill, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, that the K.O. Mannion could certainly present to the council in closed session its plan, and that could be the basis for beginning conversation about the extent of the development, and then once. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Sure. Any other?
Yeah, could we maybe clarify that track of working with the developer, traditional redeveloper, and where that stands with the courts? Do they overlap? Are they parallel processes? I'm not asking you to go into details because that may not be appropriate, but it's more about timing, I guess, where we are. If we can talk.
Do you mean the courts related to fair share?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The city has an obligation. Ideally, this project will satisfy or close or play a big role in satisfying that obligation. That's certainly that's one point that the city wants to make sure that make sure the contract purchaser knows during these negotiations. So that's obviously something that has to be negotiated. I think it would be good for the city to show that it is negotiating with someone to satisfy its obligation, and this is a good step forward by the city in showing both the courts and fair share housing that it's working towards satisfying its affordable housing requirement.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Is there public on this or?
No? Sorry.
At the end,
Public comment.
at the end.
Yeah, public comment will be at the end of the meeting. Okay. If there are no other questions or comments from the council, I'm going to read the resolution. This is a resolution 159-2022. It's a resolution of the city of Lambertville, county of Hunterdon, conditionally designating K. Halvanian Homes LLC as the redeveloper of property identified as Lambertville High School redevelopment area, block 1073, lots 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 32, 33, and 33.01. Block 1090, lots 4 and 5, and block 1091, lots 1 and 1.01, pursuant to the local redevelopment and housing law NJSA 40A:12A-1. So if there are no other questions or comments from the council, is someone willing to make a resolution? I'm sorry, make a motion.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, so can I have a roll call, please?
Councilwoman Lambert,
yes.
Councilman Sanders,
Yes.
Councilman Stegman,
Yes.
Council President Taylor,
Yes.
Mayor Noack.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to move on to presentations. We have a couple of presentations tonight. I'd like to welcome representatives from the DNR Canal Watch Project. The floor is yours for a few minutes, so please. Yeah. That's for the mic. Can you just let everybody know your name?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Robert Clark. I'm the activities chair for the DNR Canal Watch, which is like a friend organization for the Delaware and American Canal, which you all know goes right through your town. Tonight, we're going to go through a presentation of a canal model. And I think you'll find it exciting, as I did when Jim and Bob came to us with this project. We were happy to hear about it. What it does, it allows us to educate the public, educate children about how the canal works. You all use it in the back and walk along it, but you don't know how it's operated when there are boats on it. And they've come up with a terrific project, and we fully support it. Here with me tonight is our vice president, that's Charles Martin, and right now I'm going to introduce both Mike and Jim to give you the presentation. And I'll stay here, and I have brochures for you telling us about you that you can pass out later on.
Okay, good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? I think this is an exciting project. It's been something which has been going on for about 2 years to try and see whether in fact we can do this. One of the ideas, and by the way, I'm a resident of Lambertville here and got a strong interest in canals, as my team member, Jim Lomax over there. And Jim, I hope you'll chip in as we go along on that score. So I'll try and be brief and to the point. One of the reasons why we would like to try and site this project in Lambertville is really a hub of the canal, where the Delaware Canal joined and was brought over by the river crossing to the Delaware and Brereton Canal. And about 2 million tons of coal and produce was brought over every year and fed all the industries around Lambertville and also Trenton and Brunswick. Here is actually a picture of that original boat transfer. Jim, can I have the next one? So what we propose is to have a working model of the canal, and yet when I say a working model, it's going to be historically accurate. And this is the idea, is to give people an idea of how this wonderful 100-year-old canal worked, so that when they walk along the canal, in terms of recreations they're doing today, they see these old structures and they have an idea how they worked, and their children will have an idea how they worked. That in itself will promote interest in the canal and in the preservation of the canal. So the idea is to bring to life the workings of the canal structure, so it's interest, education, and enjoyment. And the operation and maintenance and insurance cover will be totally covered by Canal Watch, plus other sponsors which we have. So that's just again no cost to the city, and it would, I think, help also the visitor interest and also resident interest. So that's what the project is. is all about. And what we're hoping to do today is at least hope that this project could be carried on into the plan that you talked about for next year, be part of that plan. Next one, please. This is the actual what the canal, the wheel looks like. It's a Y. And what we propose is to make the model Y-shaped. At the top you have the essentially Lambertville and the feeder canal, which then goes down to Trenton, and then on the right-hand side, all the way up to New Brunswick and a short way to So what we're proposing is to have 5 model working locks, and these locks, and Jim will pitch in here, about 4 feet long, and the canal itself will be rather lined, but designed to fit that, which is a traditional way of lining the canal. Jim, do you want to say anything? I'm sure people can hear you from there.
No, so the scale is 1 to 24, isn't it?
It's half an inch to a foot.
Yeah. So that means to be at scale, it's about 5 inches deep and 18 inches to 2 feet wide. So not dangerously deep water. Anyway, play in it, and we are already building models of the sort of boats that use the canal.
The next slide, I think.
The next slide, right? Yeah.
So, 5 working locks, right? So, Jim. 5 inches. Actually, the site will probably occupy about 1/8 of an acre, which isn't actually very large. And in the top right-hand picture is a lot that the project team worked actually at Jim's property there, cast in concrete. The whole system, by the way, could be removable. It's not like permanent, it doesn't have to be permanent. It's not going to destroy the environment either. And the locks were made of wood, stone, and cement, and they'll be operational.
You can see from the bottom photograph that the lock is basically in the ground, so you don't really notice it at all.
As well as the locks, so the bridges built, which again will be historically accurate. Let me have the next one, too. Unusually for the canals, the Delaware and Raritan Canal had steam tugs to pull some of these canal boats along, as well as, of course, traditional mules. And there you have on the left-hand side a steam tug relief, which is operating around 1860. And this is on the right-hand side a model of the steam tug relief, which we built, which would be part of the system. And we hope to have 4 or 5 of such tugs. And they'll be operated by volunteers, possibly by the general public too, or actually by a computerized system. And then in the next slide, I think Jim will be showing another boat. Here is in Lambertville. Here's an example of a hinge boat being loaded up in Lambertville. And here is a model on the right-hand side, which actually Jim has constructed of a hinge boat. Jim, do you want to say very briefly something about that?
Yeah, that's the Lehigh Canal coal boat. And you can see the coal at the front, but it's covering up batteries, and there's a tiny computer in there that controls driving a motor and a tiller to control it remotely from your cell phone. And some people say that they didn't have steel boats, but online at Lehigh University, they've got the actual plans of that steel boat where it existed.
Should also say that the locks and boats are being built according to the original archival drawings, which we never to achieve from the Park Authority, which can really help us from the Canal Museum in Easton. Next one, I think, Jim. So these are some of the things which we suggest would be an advantage to Lambertville and why we think the system could be in Lambertville, should be in Lambertville. One is North Main Street and the Carson property is central to Lambertville. It's so easy to access by tourists, but also the general public residents. I'm assuming that it would have free access, wouldn't be any charge associated with that. But also we pay a lot of attention in Lambertville to the historic nature of the houses and residents, and with good reason. But we pay very little concern, I think, to, or interest to the canal itself. And I think this would help redress that balance and promote the canal as both a choice and an educational attraction. And of course, being right next to the school, that will also be very helpful. It's also close proximity to the canal itself. And as I say, self-funded, insured, no cost of liability. There would be a small retaining fence around it, just to make sure people didn't stumble into the system unintentionally. And finally, as we go along, educational resources we can develop and so on. In fact, there are a whole host of publications which talk about the canal. I've been amazed. I've been getting involved in the last 3 or 4 years, and the amount of interest which I've found in French publications has been absolutely great. Vast has written one of these. She's president of the web and watch too. So that is what we wanted to say. I hope that's very concise to you all, and I hope now you know a bit more about what we're doing. If I could say, I know that the Clausen properties, you said you're talking about the next year. That timescale is absolutely fine. You know, if we could possibly, plans could be finalized, we could be part of that, so that later in 2023, or even if it's at 2024, that would be fine too. I guess what we're really saying is we want to get in there early and also show you what we've done so far, and hopefully that you'll agree it's a good thing to do. Thank you. Happy to address any questions. So, that's all.
Thank you for the presentation. It sounds like a really exciting project. How long is the model canal?
The actual
Just the
length-
water part.
The water part, I think it's about 120 feet by 60 feet. Essentially, it's an eighth of an acre. And it could be elastic. I mean, it could, but it also increases interest and people want to increase it. Of course, the actual canal itself is 66 miles, so there's no way we can accomplish that in Clausen.
I'm just concerned about the size of the footprint there. And to do this, you have to dig about 4 inches down, 5
About
inches
6
down.
inches down.
And then
you'd be fine.
How long do you envision this being in place?
Could be as long as anybody, as people find interest and so on. And if it has to be removed or should be removed, it can easily be done so. Even including the locks, which are cast, and they can be easily lifted up and removed.
So it is semi-permanent, but it's not a major construction that would be a problem to remove.
And will you have scheduled, I don't want to use the word, demonstrations
Yes.
on certain days or certain times? So
Supplemented by boards, placards, which would be permanently, so any visitor at any time can get some educational aspect from the canal, but then also have some demonstration time.
when you're not there, the little barges won't run, correct?
They won't be there.
Well, they won't even be present. It'll just be the, okay. So if we were to proceed with this, if you're gonna put up signs, so to speak, and if you could list, the days and the times that,
Yes.
or also on your website, I suppose, about when that is.
It'd be great to get volunteers. We have quite a good project team as well who chip in. So people could volunteer to operate the canal, and hoping also the public on those days could also operate it too.
And is this up during the winter?
I think during the hard winter, we would drain the canal. The fire chief very kindly said he'd happily start the season fill up the tanker.
Okay. And you mentioned that you want to be able to, for public safety, have an area fenced in. That's 180 feet, right? That's what you said, the length of the canal.
Yeah, but that would be a simple two-rail fence, and it was just to avoid a tripping hazard. So somebody just walking across the property would inadvertently, even a 6-inch shallow trench.
Right.
To avoid them.
So I think it would be helpful if we were to proceed, if we could have input on what that the fence has some kind of historic tie into the period that, it isn't like it's, so it works with the site and what you're trying to put forward.
And the funding for the fence has been covered already, so. It would be
Oh, good. All right. have you, or will you be reaching out, if this goes forward, to the school system to make them aware of this as part of?
Oh, absolutely.
That's a part of their educational process.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm not loud enough. Well, that's pretty much all of the questions. I think it serves a great purpose, to have something on the site that is a great historical recreation of Lambertville's past and success. If you could find little mules.
Actually, around 1860, the canal itself decided they make some mechanical for locks to speed them through. But yeah, that would be my dream to have these kind of
Or as we're going to be discussing later, perhaps there could be little chickens. But all seriousness aside, but it serves a purpose.
That's a good one, Steve. I'm a councilman.
But it would be a great promotion, another thing to do when people come to visit the city and help fill, put heads on beds in our hotels and give kids the opportunity to, and adults, to kind of see what it was like and the function and purpose of it and how the city's grown up around them, which is a great idea. Thank you. My levity.
I just follow up on that segment. So you said it's approximately 120 feet long by what's the width?
about 60 feet wide.
60 feet.
Yes.
Okay. So when you put all the fencing and all this stuff around it, what's the approximate footprint?
It'd be about 1/8 of an acre.
1/8 of an acre.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have are there any requirements about placement of the structure on the property? Like, can't be here, can't be there, has to have this? I don't know. I'm getting very technical right now.
No, we would
but-
love to have a slight gradient. What we propose to do is a topographical survey, just to establish, where it could be.
Okay.
But no, we're not looking for any grading lines or otherwise. I'm looking at Jim there too. I forget what gradient we were looking at.
Yeah, so the actual canal had 7 locks up and 7 locks down, and then actually one extra one here at Lambertville. And we were thinking to scale it down, make it so it's not so huge, just to go 3 locks up and 3 locks down, and then the one here at Lambertville. So we need a slight gradient. So all we need, each lock at scale, it goes up about 8 inches. So it needs to go up 24, actually 30 inches, because the Lambertville was on top, which is not very much in that distance. I was surprised. It looks almost flat when you just look at it.
Yeah, I'm not as, I guess, I don't want to say concerned. I'm really asking more about the overall footprint as opposed to the height of it, or less, because the height's right, they got the sky, so.
I think we all think in terms of rectangle, it doesn't have to be a rectangle, it's Y-shaped canal, and the actual location is pretty flexible as well. And just in looking around the property, I mean, there seems to be a number of places where it needs to be located. It's not critical to have it
Okay.
in one place.
And I'm sorry, you may have said this in your presentation. Have you built these models elsewhere yet?
We've tried out what we've done again at Jim's property, the lock and so on. So we know
There
it
was a
works.
photograph of our prototype lock, which I set in the ground right in my yard,
Okay.
and built a pond at either end, and we've been moving boats up and down, and it works.
Okay, but this would be the first actual community.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Did you, follow up, did you, how, did you say, how wide would it be? 16 feet?
60.
660.
Why would it have, I can understand the length, right? Why is it, so it's 60 feet by 120?
It's very flexible.
It is
We'd like it to be historically accurate, so for the Y shape.
Oh,
And a
okay,
Y
I
shape takes,
understand.
if
So
you make it in a rectangle, it takes more, but it doesn't necessarily have to be fenced in as a rectangle. It's very flexible.
Yeah, it was just about, I think I was trying to get to why the footprint is so wide, and you have cleared that up. And there are certain sites on there where, of course, we would get your input about where you wanted to make a decision based on what part of the property would work for you the best. Just keep in mind that if your plan is to go over a winter with this out, there are certain locations that may work for you that won't work for us in the winter because of the sledding that goes on down there is very, very important to the community. So if you choose a spot where there's customarily sledding, you would have to be able to restore that area and then put it back for the spring. Just, yeah, you don't want people ice skating on that.
You have a question?
Yeah, very quickly. Have you presented to, you're presenting to us because we're your first choice, that Lambertville is the first choice for this?
And just one question for me is, I don't have another location in mind, but are you willing to consider a different location in the city?
Yes, and we've had a look at one or two other locations as well. It's just that this is, everybody's yard, we need a bigger space.
Right.
It's just that the Castle property seems to be a heaven help send opportunities right there, and also with this, and I think it would also promote the interest in the property as well. It's often historic as well.
Good.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. Moving on to the next presentation, we have Jackie Middleton, who is with the Hunter and Land Trust, and yeah, that would be great. So
I don't really have a cool presentation or anything. I just came, I thought they answered questions, but I'll let you know who I am. I'm Jackie Middleton. I work with the Hunter and Land Trust. I am the land acquisition director, and for right now, I'm the interim executive director as well. We are up at DeVore Farm on the Route 12 Circle, and I'm also a resident of Hunter Land Trust. I mean, of Lambertville. I live at 251 North Main Street in town. So I know one of the options that the city had talked about for the Fossil property was to preserve the vacant area around the Fossil site to make it for park and open space. And that's about 6.2 acres. I can't remember my notes. And the city had gotten 2 appraisals, which I think has been open to the public and people can take a look at that. The appraisals are at the state now. I actually contacted the state today. They're still determining what they're going to do is come take those 2 appraisals and come up. I'm sorry. I'm going too fast. All right, we'll start again. I'm Jackie Middleton. I work with Hunter Land Trust. I live in Lambertville. I'm not loud. I've never seen that. One of the options for the Clausen site was to preserve the vacant land for park and open space around the buildings. And the city got 2 appraisals. It started that process. They were working with Green Acres, which funds park and open space throughout the state of New Jersey. Those appraisals right now are with the state. They will take those 2 appraisals and they'll come up what they call market value. And on that market value, they'll pay 50% of that value. In exchange for it, one of the options, so if the city decides to go this route, they'll take the vacant land piece of the property, they'll put it on the recreation open space inventory. Some people refer to that as a ROSI. And that way it restricts the property to open space and public use, public recreation use. There's some conditions that have to be met to get that money. We'll have to do a survey in accordance with Green Acres. There'll have to be a preliminary assessment and maybe any areas of concern, which is environmental, that need to be addressed. And so if the city wants to go that route and wants to preserve that open space and put their property restricted to public space and open space. The Green Acres will pay up to 50%, like I said, and so I offered on behalf of the Hunter Land Trust to try to seek money to get the other 50% of that funding. So if, I think the values are, this is public, right, the values.
Yes.
So between, I think one appraisal was 72,500 per acre, the other was 78,000 per acre. What they'll do is they'll take whatever acreage that falls within the easement or the open space, and they'll multiply it by that number. And they'll give up to 50%, and if the city wants to, and they want to see the other 50%, the Hunter Land Trust is going to apply for a grant with the county to match that money. And that's basically all it was. And I'm sorry, I don't have any fancy presentation. Or with my prayers.
Please.
So,
Would there be additional restrictions for if there was funding from the other 50%?
no, the county matches. And actually, that's how most, I would say the majority of open space in Hunter County that gets Green Acres money is, a lot of it's matched with Hunter Open Space County money, and it's the same restriction. Unless it's, well, someone gets that, there's no backup for it, but yes.
It's not so much a restriction as it is just a requirement that the land remains open space with public access. Is that correct?
Exactly, but it will be subject to the Green Acres restrictions or regulations.
Yeah.
Sometimes people refer to as a deed of conservation restriction or a DCR, but in this case, for municipalities, mostly just throwing around.
Great, and you'd be willing to, if the city decides to move forward with applying for open space money from the county, be willing to help us with that?
Yes, so I met with Bill Millett months ago on the site. They seemed open to it. There's money available right now at the county level. There's been very few open space applications at the county, and I can't make any guarantees that we receive it, but we're more than willing to try.
Councilman?
The size of the model, so it is customary for municipalities to go after in Hunter County 50%. That's generally, if I understand you correctly, that's generally how it works.
I mean, there are other ways to fund, there's private foundations, there's other ways to fund public open space, but that is one venue. That is a popular way to do it. At least that's how I help municipalities, that work Hunter Land Trust does.
And are you aware of any county open space money that the city has received?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, I'm disappointed in interest,
Yeah, no, I just don't know. I don't know how you fund, I mean, there was the Green Acres site that's behind the CVS. I just don't know how the city got the other 50%. I know we did that through a public referendum. I know that there's also what you call, there's open space money that sort of gets banked for every municipality because you pay so many taxes. And I think you obtain that money. Actually, I'm looking over at Cindy. Cindy probably knows this answer better than I do.
We have not applied to Hunter Land Trust in the past for any funding.
Oh, no, we haven't done any. I can tell you that.
We
I thought
have
you asked
not.
me the county has.
And we have not received money from the county other than our banked funds that a percentage of your taxes go into what they call banked open space. And the city can apply to use that, and we have for a couple of projects. We purchased the North Union Street lot simply using our open space tax money. But we've used that for very small projects, usually for Parks and Rec.
This is just anecdotal. I mean, I've worked at the Hunter Land Trust for 8 years. I would say there've been less and less applications, so there's been more money there at the county level available. And because Lambertville hasn't gotten any, I'm wondering if it's time, if it's Lambertville's turn. I do know that there's a general consensus, they like to spread out the funding. They don't want to give everything to one municipality. I mean, Kingwood or one of those property, towns that actually do a lot of open spaces, they've got this big acreage and big areas. Like, the Sarah, the county did $1 million grant for that 2 years ago, so this would be a lot smaller.
Any other questions?
The funding is from the county's open space tax that it's already assessed.
Yes, that we all pay as the residents of Hunter County. So if you go to the plan, just to POSAC, it's the Parks and Open Space Committee, the grant gets presented there, they make recommendations, and it'll go up to the commissioner level, and then they'll make a decision on whether or not, but they will also require the same requirements as Green Acres, so everything that Green Acres requires, the county is going to require, not more, not less typically, so you'll still have to do some of those things, but they also have additional costs. I just don't know what to say with
But
this.
if we're already doing that for Green Acres, wouldn't we be able to use
Exactly,
the
yeah.
same documents?
Oh, 100%, but that's mean won't cost any more, you won't have to do anything else if you're providing additional documents or reports.
Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Just let me know what you.
We will. We
I know
appreciate
we're
your
happy
time
to do
and
it.
we appreciate your willingness to do this on behalf of the city.
The other option is the city could also apply for the grant. I mean, it doesn't have to be through the Highland Trust. The city can also apply for the grant directly. And if you want to do that route, I can also help you to assist you if that's.
I think we'll take the help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Moving on to resolutions on the consent agenda. All resolutions are on a consent agenda are considered routine and shall be enacted by one motion. Should any member of the city council seek separate discussion of any item, that item shall be removed and discussed separately. So I would ask for a motion to adopt the resolutions submitted on the consent agenda. These resolutions include resolution number 143-2022, number 146-2022 through 157-2022, and with the following resolutions removed for discussion. Resolution 150-2022, Resolution 153-2022, Resolution 154-2022, and Resolution 155-2022. Does the council have any questions about the consent agenda this evening?
I have one small question, because that's not something I'm familiar with. Councilman Stegman had raised a question about whether we could close the bank account when in resolution 143.
Councilman Sanders.
Oh, sorry, that's what I
Cindy, what was
said.
you answered that.
So there's two phases to this. There's one that is in our software in Edmonds that remains open. But because our bank account, the physical account at the bank has like 2 cents in it, there's no sense to keep that open, but we will maintain the one. And it'll just be like a subsection of the current account.
This is all rooted in an old law that, or chapter 78, which requires this municipalities to offer.
Any other questions about any of these items on the consent agenda?
Three numbers, we were dropping 150.
150, 153, 154, and 155. They're listed separately. They're listed next on the agenda. Okay.
Okay.
All right. If there are no other questions or comments, may I have a motion to adopt the resolutions listed on the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, the motion carries. Resolution number 150-2022. This is a resolution in opposition of New Jersey Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control Special Conditions on Limited Brewery Licenses. This is a resolution that was in opposition to recent changes for brewery licenses. I know we probably have a little bit of discussion about this.
Yeah, I'll take it back. I'm going to recommend that we table this this particular resolution. I'm concerned that I'm a big fan of local breweries, and know that there was actions by the ABC which was not favorably received by the brewery community. But I think that the resolution is targeting the ABC. The ABC felt that it was acting consistent with its enabling law. And the real audience for a change here is the legislature rather than the ABC. So, so I think we should take some time to look at this. I've spoken to a number of folks on this. I just, I think we should be open to making our voices heard. So I do think that there's having those kinds of entities giving them an opportunity to thrive is important. But I'm just, the way this resolution was drafted was targeting the regulatory act of the ABC. And I think they were just taking the statute that sort of empower them to do this. I would recommend after that motion to table this to further consider any advocacy in this issue. I'll make that the formal motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, all those in favor, tabling this resolution? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.
Although is somebody going to, I hear your point, but I really disagree with these regulations. So will someone, how are we going to keep going on this?
I think what we need to do is maybe recraft the resolution to focus its attention on the legislature, because I
So
think
just
that,
reframing that, that's.
I think so.
Thank you. Good point. Resolutions number 153, 154, and 155. I'm going to pull these resolutions from the agenda this evening, and the reason why is we've had a number of bid openings in the last couple of days for work related to IDA. And I've talked about this widely and frequently. We have 3 separate major contracts at play here. One is for the USDA funded work to be done in Swan and Ely Creeks. One is for the roadwork projects that's largely being funded by FEMA grants. And the last one is a joint project with West Amwell to fund the repair of Quarry where it meets Rocktown Lambertville Road and the creek on the other side. The reason why I'm going to hold off on these is we need a little bit more time. Two of them came in today. Is that right? 2 today.
That's
2
good.
came in today. There were errors, mathematical errors in two of the likely contract awards. So we want to just slow down for a couple of days, make sure the engineers have reviewed everything, and make sure everything is in good shape before we commit to what is an enormous amount of work and cost. So we're gonna hold off on these at the moment. I don't know if anybody from the council has a question about any of this.
And we have 60 days to award.
Right, okay, thank you for clarifying. We have 60 days to award the contracts. I promise to keep everybody informed as soon as we're able to feel confident that we're able to move ahead with these critical infrastructure projects.
Do we have any seasonality challenges here that we need to be worried about?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked very hard with the engineers, just really trying to get these projects, out earlier in the year. There are certainly some concerns. Our USDA grant, we got an extension on. The USDA has been very understanding, and we've actually moved much faster through the process than some of the other municipalities, and they've been complimentary of how we've handled the project work here in town. That said, there was no way that we could complete the work by August 30th, which was the original deadline, 220 days. So they offered, and some of that had to do with the permitting, both of the DEP and SHPO, the Historic Preservation Office. Is that State Historic Preservation Office, which has a much longer permitting time period. So we did work through all of that pretty well, and we did get these through. I'm very cognizant of potential issues with weather coming up, especially with the roads increase. So we have been working. I've been staying on top of this, and Cindy's been very, very instrumental in that as well. So
I think our first meeting in September is named a work session, but if we're ready to go.
we will be. We'll be ready to award all those contracts, I think in September 1st, which, as everyone knows, is the anniversary of Hurricane Ida. Are there any other questions about that? Let's play these for the moment. Moving on, we have ordinances, first reading, introduction. We have none.
Bills list.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Let me see the bills list. We got to pay the bills. Oh, there it is. Yes, the bills list. So may I have a motion to approve the bills list, please? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the bills, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we have no ordinances presented for first reading. Ordinances that are currently in draft form. I know the Councilman Sanders and Stegman are working on an ordinance to amend the Lambertville City Code for provisions for film and media. They're working on this, and we'll be hearing from them hopefully sometime soon.
I just very quickly, I reached out to the State Film Council, and they shared some information with me, which I just got this week. So I'll share that.
Great. Next one will be an ordinance authorizing and encouraging electric vehicle supply service. This is on me. I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I'll commit to doing this by September. The second meeting in September. The next one that will be Cindy is working on is an ordinance to revise the vacant property ordinance. That will also be on the agenda for the 15th. So you want to just touch base to inform people a little bit about what
Yeah,
that is?
so we have a vacant property ordinance right now that requires any property that is, has been vacated to follow certain rules, like, boarding it up, putting signs up for emergency contact. And the law changed, the statute changed that now requires mortgage or lenders to notify the municipal clerk within 10 days of notifying the property owner of any foreclosure. It's a little different. We get some, we don't get all. So we had to amend our vacant property registration to include that piece of it. So that's really basically the amendment. And we're ready to go for September 15th.
And the second one is an ordinance to amend the Lambertville City Code 2014, Chapter 20, landlord registration. You want to just touch base on this one as well, Cindy?
Yes, so this one was another change in the statute as well. So now all landlord registration for all landlords are now required to file with the city a certificate of insurance. And so we're amending our ordinance to include that. And at the same time, because of the restrictions with lead-based paint, we're considering working that into it. We're like almost there with that, and we'll be ready for September 15th as well.
And this is not all landlords, just multifamily. It's like if you're a landlord in the single family.
This, I'm pretty sure the state law is related to multi-family.
I think it says multifamily, but it does say it's owner occupied with 2 or more, I believe is the way it says.
Owner occupied is the key.
So that's how am I correct, Bill?
Multifamily is 3 units or more.
Yeah, but I believe it said owner occupied. Either way, we took it right from the statute.
Yeah, well, I'm saying for the public's thinking about this, if you, like, we have lots of people who own houses and rent them out and don't live there. Those, I think, would be exempt from this. If I read it correctly or not.
We'll make sure we have
Okay.
that when we're ready to introduce this. I want to take a last look at the ordinance before it goes out. So.
Yeah.
Will we might want to include those? Or do we have the power to include?
Yeah, well,
Right, and could you explain about the lead part?
So the lead-based paint now, and that's really more of a construction and Ken piece of it, but it's a requirement now that all properties, right, that are, especially if they're rented, have to give a certification, and that certification has to be done by somebody who has completed the class, that property meets all of the, there are certain ways or certain things that you can do for lead-based paint, and you can encapsulate it. You have to file a certification stating how you've done that.
So I guess what the state's saying is generally there's a lead paint disclosure when you sell a house or buy a house, rather. And so this actually requires the landlord to remediate in a rental unit if there is lead.
it's a little, yes, but this is the point of this law is to close a loophole that existed whereby 1 and 2 unit buildings were not required to be inspected for lead-based paint. So now there is that requirement for the inspection, and if lead-based paint is found, then it needs to be addressed.
So it's more than just an acknowledgement that there
Much
is,
more.
now that they
They have to remediate.
have to be.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of nuance in it for municipalities for municipalities whose lead level test percentages based on children's blood level tests are above a certain number. I think it's 6% or 3%. I can't remember. To look at the computer died, so I can't pull it up. But most likely for Lambertville, homeowners, property owners will only be required to do a visual inspection, not a dust sample.
Oh, okay.
But this will impact homes in Lambertville because we have lots of old homes.
And this is Ken is actually taking that class next week, so we only know our interpretation of it. He'll know more after that.
Good.
But we don't want to be the one that's going out to do the inspection. We want them to get somebody who's certified to do that and submit that certification to us.
Yeah.
So we're really just collecting data, not
Okay.
doing inspections.
Okay,
So that's the goal, and that's why they thought it would be good to do with the landlord registration. So that's what we're working on.
Public safety is number one.
So we have several ordinances for second reading and public hearing this evening, first of which is ordinance number 20-2022. This is an ordinance to amend ordinance number 19-2021, the salary range for officials and employees of the city of Lambertville, county of Hunterdon, state of New Jersey. This ordinance will,
I think ordinance 20, we have a,
20, you're right, but it's to amend ordinance.
oh, sorry,
19-20
yes,
dash 2021.
sorry.
That's all right. So this ordinance is to increase the salary range for city employees. Before I open it to the public, are there any council questions on this? Hearing none, I'd like to open this up for public comment at this time. Are there members of the public in the room who would like to speak to this ordinance?
What it means or what it's about?
Yeah, it increases the salary retroactively for city employees to the beginning of the year. This is more of a housekeeping. Okay, I don't see anyone in Zoom land?
There's one.
There's
hand
one, but
raised.
she's had it raised the whole time, so. I think we should allow her to talk. just a
Okay.
Carol, do you have a question?
Carol, if you have a question or comment, please unmute yourself and ask it. Okay, Carol, we're going to go on. Go ahead and lower her here. If you have a question, you can raise your hand again. No one at this point, ma'am.
Okay, if that's the case, may I have a motion to close the public hearing for ordinance number 2022?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. This time I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt on second reading, granting final approval for ordinance number 20-22.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next ordinance is ordinance number 21-2022. This is an ordinance to amend Lambertville City Code 2014, Chapter 17, cable television, to expand the functions and change of the name to read Broadband, Cable, and Telephone Advisory Committee. This ordinance is to amend the name and to expand the function of the Cable Television Advisory Committee to read Broadband, Cable, and Television Advisory Committee. This is at the request of the committee. And I'd like to recognize Ward Sanders, who serves on that committee and who is the originator of this request.
Well, there's no entire.
The entire committee, excuse me.
Mr. Bird is in the audience.
Oh, gosh, we don't want to, Mr. Birds. Never mind. Okay. Thank you, sir. At this time, I'd like to open, are there any other comments from the council on this? Okay, hearing none, I'll open this up to public hearing for ordinance number 21-2022. Are there anybody, is there anybody in the audience tonight who would like to speak to this ordinance? How about online? No, would you tell me how many people are online tonight, please?
11.
11, thank you. All right, at this time, I'd like to have a motion to close the public hearing for ordinance number 21-2022.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And now I would ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number 21-22 on second reading, granting final approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Next ordinance is ordinance number 22-2022. This is an ordinance to amend the Lambertville City Code 2014, Chapter 8, Municipal Parking Areas and Metered Parking, Article 2, parking meters to increase the hourly rate from $1.25 an hour to $1.50 an hour. This is to increase the meter fees by 25 cents an hour. The last time the meter fees were increased were back in 2019. I will also note in the fall, the city increased parking sticker fees from $45 to $120. This is largely because the meters are very old and require frequent amendments to the screens, the batteries, and the coin chutes. So at this time, if there are any comments from the council, I'd like to open it up to the public for comments or questions. See anyone in the room? Is there anyone online?
No, yeah.
Thank you. May I have a motion to close the public comment period on this ordinance, please?
Second.
All those in favor of closing the public comment period?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. And now I would ask for a motion to adopt ordinance number 22-2022 on second reading, granting final approval.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to discussion items. First thing on the list of discussions is chickens. Always with the laugh, chickens, right? Most of you, or some of you probably have read my piece in Lambertville Matters today. I think it's in the best interest of the city and our neighborhoods to not consider an ordinance at this time, but just to remind people that it's good to be considerate of your neighbors, whether you're a chicken owner or a non-chicken owner. I'm happy to speak to this to anybody who wants to have a conversation about it. I got about 45 emails on the subject, and I think that moving forward with ordinance right now is not the correct thing. However, I do reserve the right, obviously, to revisit this if problems continue. This conversation started based on some long-term residents who were having chicken trespassers, and the police have been called several times, and I have gone to visit myself to encourage some responsible animal husbandry habits, and so we wanted to just bring this out into the open and just to remind people that it's important to be good neighbors. I think unless the council has any comments or bad puns, please.
I'm all out, I'm all out.
You're all out of puns.
All
You
out.
got nothing foul for us tonight?
Unless the chickens hide under the shrubbery.
Okay. Lambertville Historical Society House Tour. So we talked about this briefly. I think that there is probably general support at this point for the Historical Society to include the Holcomb House on its annual house tour. I don't know if anybody has any comments about this at the council level. I think that we all in agreement that this is probably a fine thing. Yeah, okay, great. They'll be happy to hear that, and I'll look forward to being up there that day to help out with some standing around and talking about history. Next item on discussion list is Halloween 2022. This is just to inform everybody that we will continue with our recent tradition of closing off the streets from 5 to 9. The following is a list of the road closures: North Union from York to Buttonwood, North Union Street northbound from Coriel to York, York Street westbound closed to Main to George, Delavan Street from Clinton to George, Jefferson Street from Clinton to George Street, Delaware Avenue from Clinton to George, and Perry Street from Clinton to George Street. So are there any questions from the council about this wonderful tradition of ours that has grown in popularity?
Yeah, do we have to vote on the street closures?
I think we do, yes.
Tonight?
Yeah. I think.
Are we voting on it now?
Yes. Yeah, but
So there's no resolution or anything?
we just need a motion to close the streets as I've just read. Right?
We don't usually do this by resolution, we usually do it by motion.
Just a motion.
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Next is Porch Fest 2022. I would ask for a motion to approve the road closures for Porch Fest 2022. These are scheduled for Saturday, October 1st, 2022 from 12 to 6 p.m. and for Clients Court and Delavan Street between North Union and Clinton Street to be closed. I'm just going to note here that the Porch Fest has requested the use of Mary Sheridan Park from the Parks and Recreation Commission, and that was approved on August 10th, 2022 by the Parks and Rec Commission at their meeting in August.
What are the streets are closing?
Clients Court and Delavan between North Union and Clinton Street.
Or What time is this thing?
12 to 6.
And what's the day of the week? I'm sorry.
It's a Saturday. Porch Fest is the first Saturday in October.
Okay. Doesn't interfere with post office.
On a Saturday morning.
They're closed up,
Post
they're
office
closed
is at
at
noon,
noon.
right?
Well, just usually you'll cut off way to go
Yeah.
Delavan to, but you can take any street to Clinton, so.
Okay. I just need to finish kind of reading the.
Oh, sorry.
rest of this. That's okay. Porch Fest has also requested the use of the bathrooms from the city. Mr. Ryan Spreen is paying for porta johns to be placed in a parking space at Mary Sheridan Park. And he's happy to move the porta johns to any location deemed appropriate by the city. So are there any other questions about Porch Fest with these arrangements? It was a lot of fun last year, I think, and it was a great thing, given what happened a month previous. It was I don't know, I was just tremendously pleased that the city came together and was out walking around and listening to all of the great musicians in this town. I thought it was a terrific day, given everything that we had struggled through. So I will just make that. And I'm very grateful to the organizers of Porch Fest. This is a grassroots effort, and it's a blast. It's really a blast. So I fully support it. Unless anybody else has any other comments about this, we do need to have a motion.
So moved.
And a second, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, now we're on to the Greater Lambertville Area Chamber of Commerce request for turkey trot. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the Greater Lambertville Area Chamber of Commerce's request for road closures on Thanksgiving, November 24th from 7 to 9:30 a.m. So the chambers changed the route a little bit this year. Both Lieutenant Brown and I have reviewed it. Do you feel like you want to speak to it, Derek?
If it would be the council or the audience who wishes to, I can at least walk through the changes
Okay, does anybody?
to verbalize for everyone.
Okay,
And Mayor, this would be a memorandum of understanding, just like we do with everything else.
okay, all right. So, no. Or yes.
Good evening, thank you. Derek Roseman, 78 Delavan Street. I am not a member nor officer of the Chamber of Commerce, but I am volunteering with them as a runner myself, someone who's participated in this race and someone who was a member of the board with Dave Morgan back when we started this thing in 2015, I guess it was. We are requesting a change in the course to, I believe, better accommodate the roughly 1,000 plus runners that we would expect showing up. I believe last year's race brought in 1,100 and change runners. It is outgrowing the traditional start and finish area within the Lambertville Station parking lot. So to ameliorate that, we are proposing that the start and finish line will be to be moved to North Union Street. The starting line would be approximately at Coriel. The runners would proceed south to Bridge Street, where they would then turn right and continue across the bridge for the traditional lap of New Hope before returning back into the city. And then following the old course, making a left on Lambert Lane, a right on Coriel, and then a left onto North Union Street. This is where the second change in the course would come. Runners would proceed for the length of North Union to Elm Street, making a right on Elm, a right on George Street, and then running the length of George Street to Coriel Street, making a right on Coriel and a quick left onto North Union, and finishing as long as within a few meters, hopefully, once we have the course certified to be exactly 5,000 meters, to be finishing directly in front of the North Union Street parking lot that is across from Lavernick Antiques and Peace Buy and all that. The main reason we're asking for this change is with the runners previously having come down Clinton's, going north on North Union and returning along the usual route of traffic down Clinton Street. What happened at Coriel Street was you would have masses of runners turning, I'll try to do this in a mirrored way so it actually works for me, turning onto North Union Street as runners are coming across North Union Street. So you would have runners moving at 6-7 minute mile pace, running directly into people running 9-10 minute mile pace, and no one really had a lane in which to run. By moving this to the west side of North Union for the return back downtown, this ameliorates that, makes it a much more pleasant and safer route for everyone. Lisa Voorhees and Liz Pacelli from the chamber and I met with Lieutenant Brown 2 weeks ago. I met with the mayor last week to walk through, but talking with Lieutenant Brown, he also agreed that this is probably a safer way for us to run the race, and also a course that can be easily marshaled by the Lambertville police as well, and obviously in partnership with our partners in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
Have you contacted, does this affect the church on Union Street?
I don't believe it would any more so than the prior course, because the prior course would continue, use the entire length of North Union Street, because it would go down the entire, it would use the length of North Union as the runners would cross bridge onto Ferry Kleins, all that. So this would have no impact beyond what was there before.
So what you're doing is basically using the same area, you're just changing stuff.
We're using the same area, we're moving everything to the north side of bridge as opposed to having the start and finish on the south side.
Okay.
But that is a good point, Councilman, and we will make sure that not only that the church is fully informed, but also that talking with the lieutenant and with the partners in the chamber, making sure that all residents, especially those on George Street and Elm Street and Coriel, who would now be impacted by the course change, will also be notified, hopefully multiple times, to remind them that, you know, maybe not get in their car at 8:45 a.m. if there's runners coming down the streets.
The gathering, the starting spot though is North Union and Coriel.
Yeah,
I'm trying to imagine 1,100 people or.
You can
plus,
fit,
right?
we would be able to fit 1,100 from Coriel. I mean, the start line was, if you have the starting line at Coriel, the runners would filter down towards York Street. I mean, the road would be closed anyway because we've closed it for traffic for the course. So you probably,
Backed up on.
you would probably have those runners backed up to York Street, maybe a little further across, closer to, you know.
But you close
towards
that,
Elm. But that,
but that street's closed.
That's
That
street's
street's
closed, that street's closed anyway, and for anyone, and I believe there's also a request for meters to be, or for parking, no parking between Coriel and Bridge. So that there would be no interference with vehicles for the start and finish line with electronics, because this race is electronically timed. However, though, given that we are no longer closing off any part of Race Street, there would be plenty of nearby parking on meterable spaces, open spaces, and the meters aren't in effect anyway on Thanksgiving.
So those spaces will be closed. Those meters will be asked to be no parking from.
From Coriel to Bridge.
So it's just a matter of has that happened before? Is this the first time?
This would be the first time for that.
So when would those signs go up on the meters?
Because probably 2 days, at least 2 days in advance in that area. Plus the North Union Street municipal lot has to be closed down. That's where we're doing, I believe we're going to do the registration now.
And has that been used in the past?
That has not been used in the past now.
We just gotta make sure that people know, that people, other than the signs on the meters, because people will probably have to move their car the night before because they're not getting up at 5 o'clock.
We follow the same process that we do for Shad Fest. That area is closed off, that North Union Street lot is closed off for Shad Fest.
Oh, yeah.
Along with North Union Street, we do the process of posting the signs like we normally do on the meters and in the municipal lot along with the barricade. At least a week in advance, the barricade indicating that the parking lot can be closed.
So when do you envision closing in that North Union Street lot?
Well, because of the residents that are there, I have the flexibility, I think we have the flexibility to close that down even 24 hours in advance. So that there'll be plenty of time for the people to move their cars out, but it'll be posted well in advance so people know that to leave their cars there.
And this is
Because
Saturday.
there is permanent parking there.
This is Thanksgiving. This is Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
This is the morning of
Thanksgiving, I'm sorry.
Yep.
And that's what day of the week? Oh, it's always a
Thursday.
Thursday. I'm gonna have chicken. Thank you.
Free range, I hope.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions about the route, may I have a motion, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Great. I thought this would be a good time, since we talked a little bit about the Clausen Farm in coming coming out of closed session and also having Jackie Middleton talk a little bit about another preservation opportunity, a grant, just to review a few things about the Clausen property. Because it's been a while since we've talked about it. Obviously, our focus this year has been very heavily on recovering from Ida. And I think it's probably just a good moment to kind of catch up a little bit and just remind people a little bit of kind of where we are and where we've been. So I think as everybody knows, we acquired the property, I think in April of 2021. We have filed, we have shown interest with Green Acres for a preservation deed restriction from Green Acres. I just want to let kind of people know where we are in that process. Obviously, everybody, probably most people now know that we have received 2 independent appraisals of the property at the request and requirement of Green Acres. Those appraisals were done in, I don't remember when they were done, kind of in June.
Well, we didn't really receive them until
Well, yeah, we just received them about probably not even a month ago, probably 3 weeks ago. We posted them to the city website so everybody could take a look at them. The actual appraisals, I think, were done a little bit earlier in the summer. Due to a backlog, there was a little bit of a delay getting the appraisals. There was a lot of appraisal work done, I guess, this year in different parts of the state. The 2 appraisals came in at $485,000 and $449,500. I just want to remind people that these appraisals are based on the open space portion of the land only. As most of you know, probably from your own tax assessments, you have a land value and you have an improvement value. The value that these appraisals are based on is the highest and best use of the land. And because we removed the overlay on the Clausen property at some point, I don't remember exactly when.
We never enforced it.
We never enforced it. Okay, all right. So thank you for that. You know, its market value was obviously going to be less as given its zoning. So the appraisals are out there, and what the process is now with Green Acres is that these appraisals have been sent to Green Acres. They will be certified. Green Acres will take the appraisals and determine a certified market value from which any subsequent funding from Green Acres will be based. We have a 50% grant for this project. So they have the appraisals. We'll probably hear from them within the next month or 2. It's my understanding that takes about a month to 2 months to certify the appraisals. They'll send back a number, and that will provide any 50% grant for the project.
So we do not have a final number yet. It's important for everyone to understand that there is no final number. We have not gotten one from Green Acres yet.
That's correct. We've had no correspondence since we sent the appraisals in. I did have an exchange with Green Acres before we sent the appraisals, just to verify. It had been a while since we kind of talked about this, just to verify the process, the deliverables that we needed to provide in order to move forward with this. And I'll just talk briefly about them. Jackie touched on them. You know, we are required to submit the appraisals. There is a preliminary assessment that has been completed. We do have that at the city level. There are some things that we will have to take care of. I don't remember all of them now, but it wasn't a particularly long list, but there will be things that we'll have to take care of on the site. We will also be required to get a new survey using Green Acres sort of standards and requirements. Once that's done, we should be eligible. We will get eligible for the funding. Does anybody have any? Did I miss anything there, Council President?
I don't think so.
Okay. So that's kind of where we are. So, you know, the council is moving toward consideration of Green Acres funding. And I think we haven't had a discussion about it yet, but I would like to see us move forward with Jackie Middleton's kind offer to move forward with grant funding from the county. I also think it's just important to highlight a couple of things here about the property itself. You know, we now own the property and I thought it would be helpful maybe to just go through kind of the property expenses for the public, just so that everybody understands kind of what the property is actually costing us in 2022. So I just using a calendar year here, we actually purchased the property, as everybody knows, a little bit more than a year ago. Just to review the numbers here, and this is a complete list of everything for the and these numbers are based on the first 3 quarters. So there's a 4th quarter expenses that I've estimated. The LNUA, which is of course, the sewer is $532 this year. The electric bill with JCP&L is $502. The water bill for the property is $314. The oil to heat the houses is currently at $3,238. I would just note that the tanks are full, so we're going into the winter with full fuel tanks. And the landscaping costs are estimated to be about $11,445 for the year. It's a big property, as everybody knows. It takes a good solid 6 to 7 hours to cut the grass and look after the property. So that's the largest expense. The total expenses are $16,031. And I just estimated the fourth quarter expenses at $4,000, which is really, I think, kind of high, given that the fuel tanks are the primary, we're in toward the end of the grass cutting season, and we're going into the winter with full fuel tanks. We calculated also our estimated tax loss this year. So the city's tax loss, this is based on the assessment, the full year assessment of the property in the year 2021. The city's share of the taxes would be just over $5,000, for $5,027. The total expenses, including all the maintenance and the estimated tax loss, comes in at $25,063. We do have revenue on the property, which is nice. We have $12,000 coming in from Fisherman's Mark this year. They pay us $1,000. So our 2022 carrying costs for the property are $13,058. So just wanted to be clear about what the property costs us this year. Obviously, everyone knows that $3.77 million was issued as a bond anticipation note, which matured this year on April 14th in 2022. We issued a larger bond anticipation note this year. The city will be required by law to make a principal reduction payment in April of 2024 for a minimum amount of $57,470. And while that's important, I would also stress that financing the property can change, right? So we will have options in the next 2 or 3 years, whether we want to seek a longer term amortization notes for the.
You're saying, do we actually want to sell a bond?
Yeah, yes, do we actually want to sell the bond? We will have choices to make in the next couple of years about the long-term financing of the property. So I just want to get that information out there to everybody. Let's see what else there is. Council have any questions about this or anything that they'd like to add? It's on our mind, certainly, and as I said earlier, we have been talking about the property, even though it hasn't really been much of a public discussion. As we continue to work through the IDA work, which is really, as I've said repeatedly, a real focus for us. It takes a lot of time to manage these big projects. We will, at the council level, determine kind of what's the best way forward in terms of site plan for the property. We haven't had any real discussion beyond farm market, so that's kind of where we are at the moment. And as always, I'm happy to provide information to residents whenever they request it. It only took me about 10 or 15 minutes to kind of come up with this information, talking to the deputy treasurer. I thank Councilman Sanders for his clarification on the mathematical error that this English major made. But the truth would have come out in our favor eventually. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say about the Boston property at the moment. Correspondence. We have a couple of things of correspondence to note. We did receive a letter from Hunterdon County opposed to the SHBP rate hikes. The city has been awarded $75,000 for an EV charger, which is very exciting news. It's a great grant, and we are waiting to hear back from the DEP for next steps on that. So that's a great project. That's for an EV charger in the municipal lot on North Union Street. The New Jersey, just from the LJLM, the governor signs a law requiring the municipalities to create business insurance registry. And lastly, I wrote a letter to Governor Murphy about the climate change, the climate correct rules. The governor in 2020 issued a number of regulatory reforms to reduce emissions and make amendments to the Flood Hazard Area Control Act to protect against future flooding, which would base new stormwater regulations on future projected precipitation, not current precipitation. So those regulations were met with business groups who opposed them. There's a lot of development questions here. There's a lot of concern that projects already in the work might be subject to these regulations. A lot of environmental groups oppose, and I'm sorry, a lot of environmental groups support releasing the rules. And so, you know, in a town like ours where we are very cognizant of stormwater, of living, you know, with a range of steep slopes and 3 creeks and a river, I think it's very important for us to come out with a strongly worded letter and ask the governor to release these rules, which will have a significant impact potentially on any development that's done here, and will protect us from, you know, will continue to protect us from problems with stormwater. Announcements. Just a couple of announcements here. This 150 Swan Street, the city receives 0 bids for the sale of this incredibly beautiful property. I can't understand it, but there you go. So the city currently is in the process of writing letters to the contiguous owners of 150 Swan, 113 Swan, and I forgot the number, 310 North Union Street, to see if any contiguous owners, property owners are interested in any of these lots. We will be moving through this process, and we expect to be able to sell these parcels at public auction in mid-December. Got that right?
Yes.
Okay. We already talked about the Swan Creek Waterway and Quarry Street project. The convenience center hours, Saturday, September 10th, 9 to noon. Wednesday, September 21st from 3 to 5, and Saturday, September 24th from 9 to noon. Also note, always popular is the electronics recycling up at the county. That's held on Saturday.
It's here.
I'm sorry, here, that's right, I'm sorry. Even more popular, right? Saturday, November 19th from 10 to 1 at the American Legion, 320 North Union Street in Lambertville. Electronics only, no microwaves. And lastly, in terms of announcements, the resilience team, which meets weekly to discuss resilience projects here in the city relating to climate change threats, has discussed ways in which we can commemorate the anniversary of Ida. And the idea that we came up with would be to create a public space here in Acme, the windows in the front for people to bring photographs or artwork or drawings or letters, or anything that they want to City Hall, and then we would create a remembering Ida exhibit here using the windows at the Acme Center. That will go on through the entire month of September. We'll contact the schools to see if they can get some children to participate. All are welcome to express themselves however they feel is important in terms of remembering the events of September 1st. We'll also have some discussion at the council meeting on September 1st to remember that day. Any comments from the council on any of these announcements?
Did you announce, and you might have done this, where we are on Arnett? Is that?
I can, sure.
Yeah, what can you bring the public?
Yeah, of course. So culvert work, number 1 Arnett Avenue, we finished, I think I wrote about this a week or so ago. The culvert in the basement of 1 Arnett Avenue has finally been repaired. And that's great news. And the culvert, the major culvert work, which is, I always forget the exact number, $350,000-ish. On the upper Arnett culvert is the floor of the culvert has now been laid. The forms have been set for the walls. We expect that culvert work to be completed probably in the next, I'm going to say 3 to 4 weeks. Just so you know, there's obviously time for the cement to cure. But I'm pleased that that's finally, and I know the residents whose backyards that culvert runs through are very pleased that we're finally making, finally see and let's say darkness in the tunnel, right? And it's sort of happening, coming this way.
Well, it's great to know that that's so much, we've done so much in such a short period of time. And if anyone has seen the photographs of the condition of the culvert. Not so much where the culvert collapsed, but just the amount of debris in the culvert. I would say it's probably the first time since it's been put in, it's been so clean.
Well,
Clear.
it was cleaned, I think, once about 30 years ago. Paul Cons told me that it was cleaned about 30 years ago, and certainly, you know, as I've mentioned, a guy named JJ removed all the debris with a shovel and a tray that got pulled out of the culvert, 5 tons of debris from 167 feet of confined space. So I climbed in there. It's pretty exciting, a little scary, but
So we may want to figure out the next best time that the city and whatever administration is here in the, you know, future, that's an issue that should be looked at again. So we don't have that problem repeat itself as far as the culvert being clear.
right. I think it's a fair observation to say that it's out of sight, it's out of mind a lot of times,
Sure.
right? And one of the things that we will do at some point, I'm hoping I can get a grant for this, is to put a trash rack at the beginning of the culvert. There has never been one, so whatever's come down through the creeks has worked its way into the culvert. So hopefully we'll be more, hopefully we'll take care of it this time. Thank you.
Thanks.
So at this time, it's the public's turn to talk, which is nice, because I can stop talking. I just want to go through our policy about public comment here. This is all based in our ordinance. I think it's just important to keep everybody informed about the policy here. So typically, we will just ask how many people from the public wish to provide comment. Members of the public shall provide comment from the designated podium unless they request flexibility because of mobility issues. We ask members of the public to state their name and their address. We offer the public uninterrupted remarks and or questions for 3 minutes, unless additional time is granted by a majority of the council. No person shall address any specific council member nor any person except by permission of the majority of the council. Obviously, there's no offensive or abusive remarks. And members of the public who are present in person shall speak first, and members of the public who attend Zoom will speak thereafter. And the chair or the council may respond. We're not obliged to respond. We will be more than happy to listen. So bearing that in mind, are there members of the public who wish to speak? Yes, if you could step to this, we'll do one at a time, please. I'm going to ask Council President Taylor to keep track of the time. So
David Morgan, 222 Holden Way. I live behind the Clausen property. First, Mayor, let me say thank you for your hard work. I captured a photo of you picking up garbage in our neighborhood. I can attest he was working very hard. Listen, I just want to make a comment on the Clausen property. You know, this property was purchased, I believe, should have been done a little differently. I don't know of any property that I've ever purchased or have been involved in that didn't have appraisals prior to a purchase. Typically, that's just not the way people purchase property, particularly when you're working with taxpayers' money. Now that the cat's out of the bag, so to speak, and we know that the property is worth significantly less than what we paid for it, I think that brings up some concern for residents and people, honestly. And I think that in the future, this council and councils going forward owe it to the taxpayers to, one, get an appraisal prior to any purchase, and two, as past administrations have done, seek a non-binding referendum to get the taxpayers' input. I believe that this thing was done with lack of transparency. Prior city officials, I sat here at meetings, told us we were going to get $1.5 million in Green Acres money. We didn't get that. We come to find out now that we may be eligible for half the appraisal, right? A far cry. So my concern is the taxpayer. We got over it, I think. And I think we need to rectify that. I think we should consider preserving the hill. People like the hill. People like to sled there. I believe that. The historical property, if it's deemed to be historic, let's preserve it. Let's take care of it. But the other properties, let's return them back to the tax rolls, right? Let's get some tax dollars back into the city. You mentioned in your letter the deplorable conditions the rest of the municipal properties are in. We don't need to own more, right? We don't need to take care of more things. What are we going to do with a residential home? We're not in the business of renting property. I mean, that's just not what municipalities do. You're not landlords, right? You're a fiduciary responsibility of taxpayers' money. And in this case, I don't think it was spent wisely. Thank you for your time.
Hi, everybody. Judy Gleason, 86 North Union Street. I agree with the previous speaker, but although this is going to sound funny, it's sort of not. I'm talking about the chickens issue. And I know, but I just want to remind everybody, we have avian flu in the United States. I recently learned as recently as today, there's avian flu in Pennsylvania. Avian flu is a zoonotic disease. That means it passes from birds to people. And when you have chickens, I'm not saying don't have them, I'm just saying people frequently don't realize that those livestock, poultry, whatever it might be, are under the rubric or whatever of the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. There are regulations about how you keep them, but there's also huge concern about avian flu all across the country. So people with backyard flocks need to know. They need to keep up with that stuff, know if there's issues, know how they need to deal with their animals, because there could be issues that would affect the whole town, because it can pass from the birds to people. And I know it's a funny thing, but it's actually not. So, thank you.
Good evening, Paul Stevens, 3940. I agree with a lot of what the first speaker said. I guess my question related to that is, we were told at the time when people asked for an outside assessment that the city professionals had taken a look and were fine with the purchase price. I want to know if these same officials are now surprised at the assessments that came in. And if they are, we need to understand why they were way off. If they weren't, then I don't know what to say. And then back to that an earlier resolution you passed tonight, where you wanted to go out and request for ideas for the market property. I think that's great. But I'm wondering why you didn't just ask for ideas about all the properties that aren't in the 3 acres part of it. Maybe somebody wants to do a different one and come up with some ideas all at once. You know, I would have asked for individual ideas for the certain parcels and then maybe an overall idea. That's all. Thank you.
Jeff Fiddle, 33 Wilson Street. And I just wanted to start off and say that I've been going to town council meetings throughout the state of New Jersey for over 40 years. And I've probably been to more than 300 councils. The only council doesn't really speak on resolutions. Most councils have a public session for the agenda items and a public session after. You don't discuss, vote, and then have the public speak. I've never seen that happen, and I've been in Hudson County. I just want to add also about the 3-minute time. I have expertise on flooding. I have expertise on land use. I have expertise, and I can tell you that there's something wrong with the tax rules as they're going to be proposed. They violated state law and they would have been turned down. And yet I get 3 minutes. So let me take the rest of my 3 minutes and say why I'm here. It's called fuzzy math. Fuzzy math is when a town moves forward with purchasing property without doing an appraisal, due diligence, or having proper public insight. This town has always went to referendum. I have been involved with Green Acres for 45 years. I've worked on dozens and dozens, in fact, hundreds of applications to Green Acres in preserving land, from Cape May, where I've sued on East Cape May to help preserve that, to High Point, to Ringwood, and to here in Goat Hill. You do appraisals first. I don't know where in state law you're authorized to buy property without going to do an appraisal. And the reason I mention that is because as you look at what we know with numbers, well, the tax assessment had about $500,000 for the value of the land. That's pretty close to what the came in for the appraisals. Tax assessment has value of the building, 700,000. Well, that's about 1.2 million combined. The Clausen family bought out the brother for half what they were to be the appraised value, which was 675,000. Yet we buy it for 2.8 million. And this is a failure of transparency, of democracy, and financial responsibility, because now we're lucky if we can get to 250,000 from the county on top of the 250 we're going to get, which means that when you go to bond, you're going to be bonding $3.7 million for property that's probably worth 1.5. I don't know how local government signs off on that. And the reason I'm here is because I have spoken hundreds of times in this state in favor of Green Acres applications. And I've fought with town councils in many places that were anti-Green Acres acquisitions. And I've worked with nonprofits. We don't buy, John Muir didn't let us buy land. We just save places like Yosemite. And I think it's the first time I'll ever say, before you go forward, you should think about the highest and best use of the property, how to preserve parts of it that are environmentally sensitive, but also how to recoup some of that money. Something like a black shed with a farm kind of concept, art yard.
Mr. Tittle, thank you.
Thank you. And again,
Appreciate it.
democracy.
Billy Chen, 17 Clinton Street. Jeff pretty much said a few of the things I want to point out, but I have a question to the council and the mayor. When you talked about the land trust grant that you're going after and you were endorsing it tonight, how would that affect the city if we were to receive the funding from the county? We don't know if they'll match it. We don't know. What if they gave us $50,000 and we accept that? How does that impact the city? What can we do with the farm in the future if we decide the 6.2 acres we need to develop, maybe for affordable housing? Can we? If we can't, what's the penalty if we have to use it for affordable housing? Why aren't we thinking about affordable housing on the Clausen farm right now instead of, other thoughts that, why are we thinking about Havana when we know that they have 54, 56 cities that they're violating? There's violations that's been filed against Havana in the state of New Jersey. 78 violations in other states. Why are we partnering with someone with such bad history? Why are we not looking at Clausen as a solution for affordable housing? Or why are we not thinking about subdividing it, selling it off, so that we can pay our debt and put a deed restriction on the hill, the sled hill? Why aren't we thinking about things to get us out of this mess instead of putting more burden on the taxpayers and putting more restrictions on what we can do with the farm in the future?
Anyone on board straight or North Main? Everything I wanted to say has probably been said, but two of the things is it sounds like we made a mistake. We all make mistakes. How do we rectify this mistake? What's the proper thing to do? Personally, I think taking this grant, making this reserved land, devaluing the property if we're in a situation where we need to sell. The tax burden, we all know in this town, is quite hard. It's an expensive place to live. I love living here. There's got to be a solution that can lessen this. Let's not go to haste by taking this grant, preserving it. What I understand restricts any possibility of, recouping our loss if it comes to selling the property or whatever it takes. Second, I heard that there's the cost, you kind of, and I don't remember the numbers, what it's costing us per year to keep this where to have it. What's our future plans for the property? And also, what's the loss in revenue, the taxes we're being received from the Clausen zoning property? Has that been calculated in? It has? Okay. I didn't quite understand that. But
That's all I have to say. I just want to stay on peace.
Good evening. Sandy Hannon, 249 South Franklin Street, Lambertville, New Jersey. I guess the question I have to the council is if you decide to do this green acres at the 6-acre size, does that create a problem for subdividing the properties for future sales? If that is in fact the case, a direction you want to take. So I'd like you to think about that before you proceed in what you decide, if you decide on the green acres, that you haven't handicapped the property sizes of the buildings, if we choose to go that way.
Good evening, John Hinchak, 99 Warrior Street, Lambertville. The process that I'm most familiar with the acquisition of properties by municipalities is that in that New Jersey is at 100%, considered to be at 100% assessment, meaning that our properties are assessed annually to keep up with the rise in value, that the assessed value municipalities are supposed to, I believe by statute, go to condemn the property, then you go to court, and it would be our offer of 1.3.
Well, members, excuse me, John. Thank you, Lieutenant. Go ahead, I'm sorry. There were some people speaking.
I'll get Tom back on that, dude.
What's that?
I'll get that Tom back. Put it back on the clock.
Mr. Angelo, 12 seconds.
This is a violation of the First Amendment. If I had the $400, I would be filing federal charges. You cannot abridge a person's freedom of speech. The way in which municipalities are supposed to do it is to condemn the damn thing, and then a judge decides what to do with the price will be. What was done is entirely against the law. Now, is it water over spilt, or is it, are we crying over spilt milk? This can't happen again, first of all, and I think there should be at least some overview on what did occur to see what can be done. But let's get a couple things out of the way very quickly. The property, the cost in property could never be put on an overlay in which any planned action, whether public or private, has the potential to result in indirect or direct on any respect of property either listing in or eligible for listing in or eligible for listing in the New Jersey and National Register of Historic Places. It could never be put on a hit list by some kid in his basement in Cherry Hill. It can only be done through the Historic Sites Council, which is what I suggest we may want to consider doing, is say, what can we develop here with the approval of the New Jersey Historic Sites Council, in which you agree that what we do here will not deplete the importance of being on the state and national register, and work together with them so you get almost a pre-approval, and then whether it's a mix of commercial, back off in the left particularly, or housing, or both, or how it's done. But I have one other thing to say, Mayor. I have water from water. Do you know we live in a watershed?
I do, and I'm gonna need a few more seconds, but it's time.
You want to hear this, because you just passed a resolution against the Rockfall, which contains the highest concentration of arsenics in the state of New Jersey. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Mike Redmond, 23 Perry Street. I just kind of want to reiterate, I feel that the purchase of the Boston property didn't follow best practices. We should have gotten an appraisal before we bought anything. And that, quite frankly, would have improved, I think, the quality of the decision making that happened, right? But we have the property, and what's the remedy going forward? I think the property actually offers a great solution. What's south of the creek in the property is what we want. That's where the hill for the kids is. That's where the Holcomb House is, the historic house. What's north of the creek is really a commercial interest. You have the single family home, you have the farm market. We should sell it and maximize the commercial value of it. The council's responsibility is to the taxpayer. It's not the fisherman's mark. It's not to anything other than a taxpayer. So consider subdividing the property. South of the Little Creek, we have the sledding hill. We have the Holcomb House. North of the creek, we get rid of it. Thank you.
I change the subject. Helen Pettit, 6 Buttonwood. I just want to say that the discussion about the culvert on Arnett raises a point that also brings highlights all the work that was done on City Hall to clean it up and get it looking like something that we can be proud of. And the connecting tissue here is an asset management plan. I don't believe the city has taken the time to look at all of its assets and set up a schedule for maintaining them so they don't lose value and don't cost us a fortune in restoring them after it's gone way farther than it should. So I just want to put that, because you've got nothing else to do. So I just want to put that little bee in your bonnet that we ought to be assessing all of our properties, identifying what their needs are, and putting them on a schedule that is a routine schedule so that we don't end up having to pay a fortune for things.
Are there other members of the public who wish to speak? No, just once, Mr. Henchek.
No, I'm also the president of the Friends of the Age Holcomb House. I'd like to speak in that capacity.
Please, step up.
Thank you.
Mr. Henchek. I don't know if you want to.
You know where you're coming at me. As president of the Friends of the Age Holcomb House, I've worked tirelessly for 10 years to get almost $1 million as a grant for the city hall's restoration. The city, by resolution, took the money and then by resolution stated that they would maintain the property, and for 15 years on. That's it. We have a preservation plan that Herb Gissens wrote, in which every part of that house was gone over by professionals in the area. Isolated, and that made the money for the grant. They were fixed. The other report we received was pie in the sky. These guys got in there and checked the beams. These got in and checked the mortar. All of that was done. We were given a building with a clean bill of health, and the city governing body did not live up to their word and their resolution. They took the money and they didn't come up with their half. Right now, we need to have a preservation plan put in effect. I know you intend to do that, Mayor, but it has to be done before we continue to deteriorate water going in the spackle cans. Thank you very much for the second shot.
Anyone else in the room? Yes, please.
Nancy Anderson, 250 South Franklin. This has to do with the presentation to do the small model of the canal. Well, you know, I have a holistic horticulture business in town and just had a great 4-page spread in New Jersey Monthly on my company and my philosophy of how we're all responsible to take care of the earth. So for me, it doesn't make sense to even allow such a project when if you drive down Route 29, north and south, the state wastes its pesticides right along the land there that borders that water. And we have been, there was a group of us some years back trying to fight for reduction of pesticides in this area, and nothing happened because the city of Lambertville doesn't quote own anything. But it just seems like such a paradox to say, oh yeah, let us know the history of this canal. Well, if you really want to know the history, it's one of toxicity. So I'm not really quite sure that it is, you know, in our best interest to use a Clausen property. I do agree with what was said with these people. I think a portion should be kept and the rest, the taxpayers should be rebated. Our taxes should drop in this town. It's just gone through the roof the last 8 years, our taxes in this town, and you're gonna squeak us out, the ones of us that are getting older. And that's not right, because we're the ones that care about how this land is taken care of and the properties. So I believe it's the people of Lambertville that should be deciding on what to do with the Clausen property, because we're the ones that have to pay for it for generations.
Anyone else in the room rising? Is there someone online?
There is. We have Gail Carabine who has raised her hand.
Hi, I'm Gail Carabine. I live at 255 North Main on Lambertville. I live right across from the Clausen property, across from the Sud Hall, and having it be open space, nice for my view, but that's not the reason why I think it's a good idea to have the open space preserved in Green Acres, because the first duty of Lambertville is not to lower your taxes, it's to keep people safe. And we were not safe on September 1st. Water came flooding down through floods that wouldn't have happened before the 2005 development of Lambertville, which had much more water in our part of the city than had ever existed before. So I think that developing any part, even north of the creek, I think is dangerous for flood management. I don't think that Lambert's Hill should have been developed. The whole thing is that hills are steep. We're in a time of climate change, and this is putting houses at danger. And that's the most important thing for the not decreasing dollars. I think we have to take care of the city and take care of the residents. So I support the open space. And it also that the appraisal, Mayor said it, the appraisal amount was for open space preserved. It would be more, of course, if you developed it with a large number of houses, putting water in the, but that's not what the appraisal was for. Thanks.
Anyone else?
I don't see any other hands, Mayor.
Mrs. Henchek, did you want to speak?
No, I would like to be.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well said, Mrs. Henchek. Yeah, so I want to give the council the opportunity to make any observations or comments they would about any of the views expressed by members of the public.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Just a couple points of clarification. One resident asked why is the city partnering with K-Hub? That's not a totally accurate description of the situation. The fact is that property, the old high school property, is a privately owned property. We do not own it. We do not control who that person sells to. So there's a contract for purchase that exists completely separate from city involvement. And so because of that situation, and because we are trying to fulfill our affordable housing obligation, we want to have a conversation with them and make sure that this owner, should that contract, come to fruition, should it actually transfer ownership, that we'll be able to enforce the redevelopment plan that's there. So just clarifying we didn't go out and seek them out, if they came to our doorstep. One other point, I should have these dates down in my head right now, but I don't. There was a significant conversation about affordable housing on the Clausen property. It was brought up, it was discussed, an ordinance was introduced and roundly shot down by the public. So we just need to stop having that conversation, and why don't we just put the affordable housing there? People already said no, very loudly. So that conversation has been. And with regard to the appraisals, I can't disagree. I'm as disappointed as anybody else. It's not what we anticipated. However, it is not accurate, and I know it's nuanced, but it is not accurate to say that these appraisals that have come in are for the entire property. They are for the portion that has been set aside for preservation. It does not include the buildings. Any appraisal that would have been for the entire property would have been much higher. That doesn't negate the fact that it's frustrating, disappointing, but as we debate these issues, I want us to be as clear about the facts as possible.
Are there any other reflections from the council? Okay. Can I ask for a motion to close the public comment period? May I have a motion to close the public comment period, please? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of closing the public comment period, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. This time, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. We appreciate everybody being here and participating.
Hey, Lindsay.